Geek Out! Bleep blop bloop gamers. It's time for another installment of the Video Game Archives. Joining us this week, just like I guess every episode of this, it's Zach Williams!
Oh my gosh, thank you for having me.
It's been a couple months, man, since we talked video games and talked Mario, and I feel like there's been a lot of things that have happened, even though we're going to keep it like it's 1996 this week.
Yes, I've been very kicking myself for not being able to talk about this sooner, considering how pivotal of a Mario game this is, but I'm very thankful to be able to do this now and to just unload on all things that are wonderful about this title.
Yeah, I mean, this time around we're talking about Super Mario 64, the launch title for the Nintendo 64. After that, basically most of the major games that grace this console just kind of got the suffix 64 just to remind you what console you were playing it on. I guess there was a lot of Super Nintendo games that were like Super something, like Super Metroid and Super Star Wars. And
oh my gosh, it doesn't even hold a candle to how much there was. Even with some lesser known third party titles. Well, actually, this one was kind of like a cult classic, like Super Smash TV, for example. Just about anything had a super in front of it.
Yeah. And this one, I mean, again, we're in the 64 era. This is the game. I remember seeing this game for the first time, and I was just like, this is it. Every single video game from now on is just going to get the 64 treatment. Like, we're going to... And a lot of them did. Donkey Kong, Zelda, Star Fox, F-Zero. But I was like, all games are going to be... Yeah.
I'm honestly... sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm honestly impressed that Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time didn't get... I mean, I'm sure it was like the working title for a while, being like Zelda 64. Then again, it was never called Super The Legend of Zelda either.
Yeah. I mean, Star Fox was always just Star Fox, and F-Zero... I guess F-Zero didn't take the 64 suffix. They were just like, now it's F-Zero X.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I mean, this was a revolutionary game. I remember just playing like for hours in Bob-omb Battlefield or just running around the castle just because of how immersive and how much of a breakthrough it was to suddenly jump from like Yoshi's Island to this.
Yeah, I think one of the best connections that I have to Super Mario 64 was when it came to what it was like to play the game. It actually goes fast forward to the E3 press conference for when the Wii was unveiled, and when Reggie Fils-Aimé said, hey, this is all about the feel. Just like with Super Mario 64 at the time, it was about the feel. Playing is believing. And that was genuinely what it was like when I went into a Blockbuster and they had Super Mario 64 and you're playing a full 3D Mario game and he's just free to roam around anywhere.
Yeah, and he's learned like boxing and stuff since, he's finally punching. I guess he punched a bit in Super Mario RPG, but that's a turn-based thing. We don't really necessarily talk about all that, even though it's a fantastic game. But this game was like extraordinary. This was one of those things where it's like there's life before Super Mario 64, and then there's life after Super Mario 64, right? Because there was like no going back. I guess they did go back now that I'm saying this out loud, but like it was like, oh, this is just how the franchise is going to always be. And I think every single 3D Mario game is kind of compared to Super Mario 64 from now on.
Yeah, this was really huge at the time because when it came to stepping into how to execute 3D games, like a lot of them, especially I'm trying to think of some previous titles and titles around that era, where like Sega Saturn, for example, where it's just like they tried to approach 3D, but they couldn't quite execute it, where it was just like it was either really buggy or the character moved around like a tank and like the camera just didn't know what it wanted to do. Super Mario 64, it set a lot of things in motion, especially with the analog stick, because consoles at that time, it was just all buttons. And even with the PlayStation, like the first iteration of the controller, it was just all buttons. And then it adapted like the dual analog sticks. So N64, they were the pioneers of the analog stick and being able to give a character like freedom to roam about wherever.
Yeah, I mean, it was also the trigger button, the Z button. That always kind of like, that was something that threw me off. Because honestly, I love the Nintendo 64, but I would argue that of the home consoles, the 64 probably had the worst controller.
You wish you had a third hand.
Yeah, it wasn't really ergonomic at all when you kind of like think about it.
No, even for my adult hands, I feel like I'm crushing it.
Yeah, but I mean, as a kid, and I guess even having grown up with it, I don't give a shit. Like it was just like it's
so versatile.
Yeah. This is the future. All controllers will be uncomfortable in the future, and based on that first
whatever in the back of it.
Yeah, based on that first Microsoft Xbox console, I was right. But before they shrunk it down to a more manageable size, because I remember the first gen ones were enormous. What is your favorite world in Super Mario 64?
Oh goodness. I am going to have to give this one to. Man, does the outside of the castle count as a world? Because I've honestly spent more of my time there than I have any other world.
Oh yeah.
Just like jump and dive and swim and climb on trees and the castle has a front door. I can walk into that. But no, I like as far as filling objectives and getting stars goes, I probably had to give it to Womp Fortress because I feel like it had like a tower leading up to the top, similar to Bob-omb Battlefield. However, this Womp's Fortress in particular, I feel like it had the challenges that were similar in the 2D Mario games that were implemented into a 3D world. And that's something that I really appreciate. And then Womp, I just thought it was so simplistic of a boss, just being like, hey, it's a flat block and we're going to make him a boss. I just thought that was so brilliant for its time.
And this is the first game with Womps, too.
Exactly. And it's just like, they were able to make a fully fledged character out of such a simple shape and just like slap hands and feet to it.
Yeah. I was always, Bob-omb Battlefield, I've got such fond memories of that it's probably, it's again, in addition to just running around the castle, the world I would run around the most would just be that first world because, this was before I was like, oh shit, I have to get like at least 70 power stars to beat the game or whatever. I was just like, I'm just gonna hang out. You can hang out in Bob-omb Battlefield. It's harder to hang out in like Lethal Lava Land or Mario's Rainbow Cruise or Tick-Tock Clock,
But, and not to mention, like those later worlds are so stressful to me. Where, lava, for instance, where I forgot what land felt like, or even or some of the later Frozen worlds where it's too cold that you still have like the same like pain inflicted on you.
That's a very good impression right there. Is this the first this isn't the first game ever that has Charles Martinet as Mario, but it's the first canonical, yeah.
So yeah, I remember to have this in the back of my head leading up to this. So as far as like mainstream titles go, absolutely Super Mario 64 is the first. If you want to go really obscure with it, the first Mario voice by Charles Martinet was in Mario Teaches Typing. And even though it was a typing learning software, there were other things that you could play in it, such as Go Fish. So, for instance, you're playing Go Fish against Mario, and then if it's so funny the way they did this because Mario's like, "Do you have any threes?" And then the other player's voice, which is supposed to be you, it's just like, "Mario, go fish!" Like they didn't even try with the other voice.
Yeah, yes. And Mario Teaches Typing, I'm trying to think, that was what, 95-ish? So it was like right before this.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was the game that the Nintendo 64, because it was like in development the 64 was known as Project Reality. Because they're like, we want to make this thing like 3D and real and everything, and it's like, well, it's 3D, But I remember even like, in 96, I'm what, like 10. The graphics just blew me away. Like in every single, and I felt like every game that came out later on the 64, with a few exceptions, looked, at least the big marquee games, looked even better than the last. But I remember just being kind of like how I was struck so much by Donkey Kong Country back in 94, being struck so much by Super Mario 64 in 96. But yeah, the I think something that has to be mentioned. This is kind of like a deep Easter egg. What do you think of like janky ass Yoshi if you get all 120 power stars?
Oh, I thought that was the coolest like end game secret ever. Just like go on the roof, get Yoshi, get like all these lives, so you can just like free roam and kill yourself, or just like lots of trial and error to your galore, and then have a hat and fly all over the place outside the castle. I thought that was the coolest thing. Yeah, I thought it was like such a phenomenal reward, and especially like oh my gosh. Especially now, since like the game has just been so exploited and tool assisted to death, and like every glitch and polygon has been explored, where you can just like do it without even getting 1 star. I just, oh my gosh, it's I thought that was just so cool, and it was so clever regarding like one showing Yoshi, and two having that be the reward at the when you get 120 stars.
I got to be honest. I never myself have been able to get all 120 stars. I can certainly.
No, not even close for me.
Oh, yeah?
It's just, yeah, I've just never been able to pull it off. I think it's more of a diligence, like now in my current age. Now, before it was just like, hey, I'm excited to face Bowser the third time, and I did this, so that's good enough. Then I just lie to all my elementary school buddies.
How quickly can you beat this game?
I don't know, maybe like a day. I never really had a timer next to me to count it, but yeah, I would say like a good day. I know where like all the easier stars are.
Yeah. No, I've got a whole system down. I haven't played it in a while, I'll be honest with you, but there was a time where I could beat Super Mario 64. Again, not get all 120 power stars, but just get the requisite 70, because I'm no good with the glitches either. And that always felt like cheating. I can do it in about 3 hours.
Here, let's back up a bit without going into the completion of stuff about it. Okay, so you boot up the game for the first time. You have Mario. He has a voice. You get to play around with his face. You even have Peach at the opening cinematic saying, "Dear Mario, I have a cake for you." What was going through your mind?
First off, cool, I get to play with Mario's face. I spent a lot of time playing with Mario's face, too.
More time than I like to admit.
Yeah, me too, totally. Also, is this the first game where Princess Toadstool becomes Peach? Like, she gets a first name? Because, yeah, she like, hey, Mario, please come to the castle. I baked a cake for you. Yours truly, Princess Toadstool. Peach! Just like, oh.
I think that was the bridge. And then later titles... because like Mario 64, she was just like Peach, and then Paper Mario 64, it was Princess Peach. So yeah, I think that was
Mario Kart 64. She's just Peach.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, her regality is never in question. Always has the crown. But it kind of it wasn't quite as jarring as Dr. Robotnik suddenly becoming Eggman. Because
that is true. That came out of nowhere.
Yeah, because that's apparently what he always was in Japan. But with Peach, you're right. There is kind of a bridge because, she addresses herself as Princess Toadstool before signing her first name as Peach, and you're just like, oh, I guess she had a first name this whole time. That makes sense.
Or like that's her way of doing like X's and O's.
Yeah. Just like, oh, that's
like what Princess Toadstool, Peaches.
Yeah. Also, Lakitu is the cameraman.
Oh, I thought that was so clever. I mean, obviously, like at the time, I didn't think anything of it. I was just like, okay, Laxu's not an enemy in this game, whatever. But then looking back on it, be like, oh, hey, there's a camera in a 3D game, and this is how they choose to implement it. And the other thing that I thought was really cool too is when you go to the room and like there's the huge mirror that spans the wall, and then you can see the Lakitu cameraman. Oh man, I thought that was brilliant.
There is a Lakitu that you kill though. I think it's at Big Small World or something like that.
Yeah, okay.
And then you kind of hijack his cloud. I wonder how cameraman Lakitu feels about that.
He's probably just more focused on getting the Pulitzer.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, very, very Nat Geo of him. But also like, I feel like this is like the most 90s like Mario game, like the weird like hip hop beat that Bowser has when you fight him the first 2 times.
Yeah, I mean, honestly though, as far as '90s cliches go, I'm glad that's all they did because they could have easily given Mario sunglasses and be like, "I'm too cool for you, bros," and like gone off on a skateboard and like given peace signs. Like they could have like really buttered it up,
Well,
make him like a
yeah,
cool spot.
he's had the peace sign since like Super Mario World, but I guess they saved all those little like skateboarding and basketball for Mario Party.
Too radical. Check it out, yo.
Yeah, he was never like Mar or Sonic. That's like, hey, this is why aren't I hip, kids? It was like, oh no, it's just Mario.
Yeah.
Mario's the constant. Sure, he can do like karate kicks now and the coffee grinder and stuff like
But
that.
he's still wearing overalls.
He's still wearing overalls. He's still like he can lose his hat in this one. Wild, you know.
Yeah, that blew my mind too. Oh my gosh, we haven't even gotten into that.
Well, I remember like losing the hat in like Swirling Sands Land, and then like dying, and then him falling out, and he still doesn't have the hat, and I was just like, wait a minute, I have to
Not
go.
even that. Just like when you collect a star, he jumps out of the painting, takes off the hat, puts it back on. Even then, I was like, whoa, he has something underneath his head.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's just so much. Like, it's a Mario. It's a fully realized Mario, as far as this game had finally shown. There was like, I mean, there was just so much. I mean,
Absolutely. It wasn't like, hey, let's make a 3D game just to say we've made a 3D game. Obviously,
that was
they
Donkey Kong.
put sweat and tears into it, and it shows.
Yeah. Whereas, like, I always felt let down by, like, Zelda is some of my favorite shit. Star Fox 64 is the best Star Fox, just empirically. But DK 64 was the one that kind of felt like almost a little dialed in. That
Yeah.
was the one that kind of lost me. But Mario 64, and Mario 64 was huge because, without Mario 64, you probably don't get Banjo-Kazooie. You probably don't get DK 64. You probably... I mean, they originally Ocarina of Time was supposed to be first person, and then after Mario 64, they're like, "Oh no, we can do it third person." People will still be into that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think if Mario 64, I mean, obviously it's just me spitballing without having anything to go off on, but if Mario 64 didn't do what it did back then, we'd probably just have like 3D installments of games doing like a Temple Run-esque because they didn't know you could like free roam in 3D scape.
Well, even yeah.
At least honest. Okay, so like if Mario 64 didn't do what it did back in 1996, it definitely would have been delayed for a very long time getting the games that we have now.
Well, even the GoldenEye developers were like, "Oh, we got the idea of coming up with like objectives from like Mario 64 because you would have to get objectives to get the star, like basically."
Sure.
And it was like, "Oh." So it's kind of revolutionary, like just purely groundbreaking how this game was when it first came out, I don't know, 22 years ago now. This really was the game that sold the console. Unfortunately, like this is the first time since Nintendo's come to America that Nintendo doesn't have the best-selling console of its generation. Nintendo 64
That's right.
is number 2 to the original PlayStation.
Yeah. Wow, that was definitely some exciting times looking back on it. Because have you had a chance to look at the, I guess, like leaked screen grabs of what Final Fantasy VII would have looked like on the N64?
I've seen like Cloud, like 64 rendered Cloud or 64-bit Cloud. I haven't seen full on.
Yeah, I mean, granted, I didn't know who the character was, but like, yeah, I saw like a brown-haired dude with like blocky hands, and it's just like, okay, this is what it will look at on the N64, but it was just, because of the storage at the time and then cartridges being more expensive to make, it's just like, hey, we want to go the PlayStation route, even though if it takes us 8 discs or whatever, it's still cheaper than a cartridge.
Yeah, that was the name of the game. And originally, the 64, if it was going to do better, they would have kept at like they already added the expansion pack, but we would have also theoretically gotten the disc drive system, which would have been wild. Now, what do you think of, because this game did get an enhanced remake close to a decade, about 8 years after its initial release with Mario 64 DS, where you get to play Yoshi. You start out the game as Yoshi, and you also get Wario, Luigi, and of course Mario. And I think they bump up the star count to 150 in that one. What have you played it, and what do you think of it, especially in comparison to this?
I don't know. It was just so I did play a little bit of it. For the DS, it's funny. Even though it was like a launch title for the DS, I just didn't care for it at the time. I was like, yeah, man, I want Nintendogs for some reason. But yeah, so playing Super Mario 64 DS, I thought what it was doing was really cool, and adding all these extra things was really neat, bringing it into the modern area and like beefing up the character models and whatnot, and being able to control the characters with the stylus even. And I thought that was really cool, and having the map underneath. But it was just, I think I was just at the time I was just so checked out with playing Mario 64 that I didn't really care to see this new iteration all the way through.
Yeah.
I don't know if other people felt the same way, but it was just, I'm playing through with Yoshi, and like, yeah, he's got the flutter jumping cool, and then he has like the cap and your Mario. And like me saying all this stuff, it sounds like really cool and exciting, but at the same time, I'm just like, been there, done that.
Yeah, I
Show
mean,
me something else.
yeah, there was kind of like this thing when that game came out in like 2004 or whatever, where I was like, I already own Super Mario 64. And of course, this is coming from the guy who owns Super Mario 64 like 3 times, like on the Nintendo 64, on the Wii, and on the Wii U. So a bit of a hypocrite there, a lot of a hypocrite there. But it was, yeah, there was just like, well, I would rather get new DS games. Also, I thought the controls on the DS, because it was like a launch title for the DS, I was like, this is kind of like using the
analog stick.
yeah, you were using the stylus kind of as it was kind of wonky.
Yeah, I mean, maybe if they did like a Super Mario 64 2, I probably would have appreciated it more. But yeah, it's kind of like this beefed up port, and I appreciate what they were doing, but it didn't work for me personally. But for people who didn't grow up on Super Mario 64, absolutely go for it, go nuts, and I'm sure you'll love it all the same.
Now, what was some of your favorite secrets? Because this game is like fucking full of them. Yeah, well,
I thought, oh my gosh, I mean, just getting like the wing cap in general, I just thought was the coolest thing ever. Being able to like get a running start, jump, and fly like wherever. I thought that was so cool.
It took me a while to be able to master how to use that wing cap.
Oh yeah, especially when collecting red coins. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it definitely goes back to one, having so much freedom to go wherever the heck you want, but being able to do that in a 360-degree sky, I think was so cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that kind of like the cape in Super Mario World, that was the big selling point with like, it was like you get to fly this time around. It's like, well, we kind of got to glide or fly last. Okay, fine. I'll run with it. Certainly more so than the invisible cap that also made you intangible in the Metal Mario, which just made you be able to walk underwater and endure poison gas.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Metal Mario, it stands the test of time to this day because he's being featured as like an obscure character in like karts or sports or whatever. And it's just really cool having a character you know and love and being like so shiny and chrome.
Yeah. This kind of like T1000 version of Mario.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it was like not too far from the Terminator 2 installment, so it's still very much appreciated.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, for me, the wing cap Switch Palace is certainly up there. I guess all the Switch Palaces were technically secrets. You had to drain the moat for the invisible one. I liked the two that I always come back to. I like Tall Mountain. The idea, it's like you see this like room of all these past portraits that you've done, and you're like, but I've never been to that portrait, and it turns out to be its own. Or the one that you can only see in the mirror. Was that Big Small World, or was no? That was no. It was Cold Mountain or Cool Mountain, wasn't it?
Ooh.
Because you see it in the mirror.
I think it was Big Small World.
Okay, maybe. Well, no, Big Small World was you run towards it, and the hallway becomes huge, right? Because you're like shrinking down to Big Small World.
Oh,
And then Wet Dry World, depending on what height you jumped into the portrait, was how high the water level was.
Oh my God, Katy Perry would have a field day with these worlds.
Yeah. Hazy Maze Cave, totally. Trying to think what I'm also always a big fan of Big Boo Haunt. That was a favorite of mine.
Oh yeah.
I tend
How was your reaction to the haunted piano?
about everybody else's. I think
Yeah.
getting just scared shitless. Just like, oh, cool. Do I have to like?
Jump your chest. Don't want to touch the game for a while.
Well, it's like, I thought like everything else in the game, you could kill it. You cannot kill it. It just exists. You're just like, oh, I just have to kind of maneuver and get that red coin. But yeah, no, it was kind of. I always tend to like the spookier levels because I feel like the development team brings a little something extra to kind of let their imaginations go wild a bit instead of just like generic water world X like Dire Docks or something. But the uh
Yeah, I gotta disagree. Like in this quick thing, I always treat ghost levels like I do water levels in the sense that I hate them and I never want to go back to them again after beating them.
oh man, that's I mean
Like,
the that's one of the first worlds that I'll 100% through my speed run is Big Boo's Haunt because I'm like, oh, I just know where everything is, and it's easy to get 100 coins here too, because every boo's worth like 10 coins, and there's like a blue switch thing right there. Yeah, cool. Or are they worth 5 coins? It's been a while. Either way, that's a favorite of mine. So is Big Boo Haunt your least favorite, or is it something one of the harder ones like Tick Tock Clock?
it's just that's just like something with like ghost levels in general, where it's just like I've yet to like experience a ghost level in a Mario game and be like, this is fun. But no, as far as stages that I don't particularly care for is I know it's a favorite, but like Dire Docks, I just
Me neither, man. Me neither. I'll take Jolly Roger over Dire
yeah,
Docks.
absolutely.
Or not Jolly
Like those
Roger.
are just
Yeah.
like, oh hey, you go to the chest, you swim around the big eel, like you
That
go through the motions. But like Dire Dock, I just feel like it's such a chore.
the big eel scares me worse than the living piano does
Fair enough.
because you have to lure that shit out, and it's such a pain in the
Yeah.
ass.
hmm
And then he comes. I'm almost guaranteed to get accidentally hit by that guy just about every time, which sucks. But yeah, man. Now, I mean this is the. I'm trying to think. There's so much the spinning, the iconic way to fight Bowser,
Yeah.
where you throw it by the tail.
Yeah. Okay, so we talked about our first experience of the game, voiceover. How about the rumors and speculations that I know you've experienced at the time of possibly seeing Luigi, playing as Luigi? How did you experience all of that?
I mean, I knew about the weird plaque in the courtyard, the haunted courtyard, that has like the L or whatever in it.
Mm.
I think I'd seen the doctored screenshots of like a 64-bit Luigi inserted into the game,
Yeah.
but I don't know. The big thing was I was wondering if they had taken all the time to build Yoshi, if there was a possible way to ride Yoshi. Apparently, that was early in development, but they couldn't quite get the controls down at the time. Um, I just for whatever reason I was just like, oh, I guess Luigi isn't in this one. It that was one of those ones that I just kind of accepted as not being the case. But yeah, no, I always wanted to ride Yoshi in Super Mario 64.
Yeah, I guess that was I guess it was a much different experience because like me when I was playing this game, I was in elementary school and um, everyone just like made up everything about everything. And so of course when there was the doctor screenshots, you had like the proof in the pudding in the magazine if it was like a April Fool Day magazine or if it was just like a magazine that didn't know that this was fake at the time. It was just like, oh my gosh, you can play as Luigi. And of course everyone was speculating about the plaque and the L is for real like 2041 or whatever. And it was honest. It was just so wild being able to try to explain this to a younger generation. But at the time, it was just let's go deeper down the rabbit hole and see where it goes.
Yeah. No, I mean it's just like there's a lot of cool shit there. There was enough to chew on without Luigi being there, where I was never like, oh well, it'd be cool. But something that I was really jonesing for that never obviously happened from the 64 era was getting the rest of the Triforce, the complete Triforce, not Ocarina of Time. I always wanted that.
Yeah.
I was like, there's got to be a way. That's a game I poured over because I played Zelda more than I played Super Mario 60. I played both games in uncomfortably that amounts that I will not admit go into specifics about. But Zelda wins in terms of like time spent playing any 64 title. Though honestly, like Mario Kart 64 was both the first Mario Kart first 64 game I ever had, and probably the game when I just want to play a 64 game. It's not necessarily going to be Perfect Dark. It's not necessarily going to be Super Mario 64 or Zelda. It's probably going to be Mario Kart 64, just because that for me is the foundation. And I loved how
it's very easy to pick up and play.
And they just so like how accurately they recreated the exterior of the castle in Royal Raceway.
Yeah, absolutely.
You could actually drive up to it. You know,
it's really great to just like look at any Mario installment and be like, oh, okay, let's see what you did with Peach's Castle, and seeing like if it holds up, and be like, okay, you pass, and then like seeing someone be like, wow, no, you were kind of sloppy there. You could have been more faithful to it.
Yeah, it's not quite the same stained glass pose in that one, but
yeah.
I mean, no, this is really like a franchise-defining game.
That is true. Yeah, I mean, it set the stone for what we expect to see out of Peach's Castle.
Like the classic 3 on the NES. Super Mario World, and this. None of the ones like you and I have talked about the Game Boy ones. None of them are franchise defining.
Exactly.
The only thing that survives the Game Boy games is Wario, really. And you could argue Daisy almost as like an afterthought, like, oh shit, we've got Daisy. That this is and this is the last like definitive Mario game for a while, unfortunately. Like, I'm not saying I don't like the games that follow this, but it isn't until like what, New Super Mario Brothers, where they're like, oh, like it's where they start to take cues, immediate cues. You could maybe argue the first Super Mario Galaxy, but this is the one that like defines an entire, not just a generation. You could argue 2 generations, because it out defines the one Mario game that comes out on the GameCube. It out-defines, anything that comes out on the Game Boy Advance. Granted, they're all just like enhanced remakes on the Game Boy Advance, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think another thing that's really important to bring up is, especially with the 3D installments of platformers, is that Super Mario 64, it was one of the first titles where it's just not only do you have to play a level, but you play the level multiple times, and there's different objectives. And then when you collect these stars, you have to meet a threshold in order to progress further in the game. So, and this is one of the first titles to do that. So it's just like, for you, how do you feel about it? I mean, did you find it like as a chore as some parts, or do you find some where it's just like, oh, hey, that's very clever looking back on it? Like, what went through your head when knowing that you had to pop back into the same painting to collect more stars in order to get past certain doors?
On the one hand, it wasn't a big deal at the time, because I was just blown away about how revolutionary and how fun this game was. On the other hand, playing games like Banjo-Kazooie or Banjo-Tooie or DK64, where you could theoretically beat an entire world in a single run. More so with Banjo-Kazooie, because DK64, you're like, now play the same world with a different Kong.
Yeah, DK64 I felt like was like where it went too far.
Very tedious, very tedious. Like I said, that's a game that I own. I have 2 copies of it on the Nintendo 64 for some reason. I also own it on the Wii U Virtual Console, but that's a game that's more tedious. I feel like every time I play it, it's a little more tedious than the last time I remembered. Whereas Mario 64, yeah, you have to go, but like I think there's enough variance, because the world changes slightly, unlike Banjo or DK. The world changes slightly every time you go into it to get a different star, right? Like, hey, this time, like, there's a Koopa Troopa waiting to race you, or hey, this time, like, you can access this cannon to blow open this wall, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, that part was, I mean, yeah, there's quibbles there, but nothing more than that, because at the time that was as good as it got. That was the best it got.
It's true. Yeah, I mean, it's funny looking back on Super Mario 64 DS and then seeing that they revamped the 3D Mario model. because it looked nothing like Super Mario 64. Obviously, knowing um, mainly what they could do with the technology at the time.
Yeah. There's part of me that wishes that we'd get the less cartoony Mario, but
Yeah,
at the same time, like I mean, at the same time, I'm sure there's purists that are like, well, he doesn't look like he did in Super Mario World, and it's like, well, he's like every decade spanning franchise, he's got to be tweaked and reinvented every so often.
exactly.
So, and obviously I mean, you look at the Switch's numbers, look at how well embraced like Odyssey's been. I think that Nintendo, I mean, they're not,
I played
spotlight.
Odyssey.
I have not played Odyssey yet. I need to
Oh
play
my
it. I
gosh.
need to get a Switch, is what I need to do. Um,
There are some amazing outfits that you can unlock and use while playing Odyssey.
the one that I want to play the most is Philadelphia Freedom 76 Mario, where he's got like the red, white, and blue stripes and everything.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think that's the his Mario Golf outfit.
Is it? I just call it.
Yeah,
I just call it because he looks like he's like celebrating the 4th of July. I just
Iron
yeah,
Patriot, but with Mario.
yeah. I don't know, Philadelphia Freedom.
Yeah.
But what are some? Okay, we've talked about gabbed about this game for a bit. Kind of, what are some of the big lasting? To kind of sign off. What are some of the big lasting memories and impressions you have of Super Mario
Well,
64?
yeah. I mean, granted, I played this game when I was still in my single digits, so transitioning into the 3D world wasn't as easy for me. Like playing Mario games, and this was definitely before the era where developers try to make everything accessible to everyone of every single age, no matter what their experience. So there were times where like I was just in shallow water and I was drowning until I had like a friend or someone be like, "Hey man, you should probably pull up," and I didn't know how to pull up at the time. So I remember constantly drowning with Mario. I
Yeah,
remember,
which wasn't quite as traumatizing as drowning with Sonic, but still kind of traumatizing.
yeah, thank God it didn't have that music. Oh my gosh. Um, but no, one of my favorite things is I appreciate going to like the third Bowser level and feeling like such a badass, like going past all the obstacles and then like finally making it into the pipe and be like, and seeing Bowser decked out in rainbow like radiance, be like, yeah, man, I'm gonna
I'm
get you, Rainbow Bowser.
yeah, I'm Bowser.
Well,
Like,
it's the
oh,
same thing
okay.
I did the last two times.
Yeah, no, he's yeah, that never made sense to me. Why is he tie dye Bowser now? Okay, whatever, fine. He can.
Yeah, and I also remember oh goodness, I forget the enemy's name, but it's a giant eyeball. He had like a very clever pun name, I forget. But you run a circle around him, he dissolves and becomes a coin.
Yeah,
Um,
a blue coin at that.
that's right, they had blue coins.
Those were the most valuable ones.
Yeah. Um, yeah, and actually this is like the pioneer for the find the eight red coins that
Yes,
were also featured in the 2D platforms and later 3D installments like Galaxy.
yeah, those are like those are
Yeah,
everywhere.
those are definitely a milestone that's appreciated.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, yeah. Anything else, Zach? Before we hang it up on this one, pop it back in the archives.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's a very exciting title. It really meant a lot to some people. Like people are still playing it to oblivion to this day, just to exploit every little glitch and graphical exploit they can. And it's very wonderful to watch. And everyone's doing speedruns to this day. And it's like if you want to see the OG Mario 3D game, by all means, like download it, go nuts, or find the cartridge and pop it into the N64. Treat yourself
Yeah.
because it's definitely an experience.
Yeah, yeah. So, this has been another installment of the Video Game Archives. We'll be back next time with the one canonical like main series Mario entry on the GameCube, Super Mario Sunshine, which wasn't a launch title, but
Yeah,
yeah, the so this is it. we're in the 3D world now, and soon we're going to be in the 21st century for Mario, which is kind of wild because we started in 1983. Yeah. So I'm Sam.
I'm Zach.
Thanks for listening. This has been another Geek Out production. If you enjoyed what you heard, hey, we've got a special episode every Friday. Of course, there's the usual catching up show every Wednesday. And you get book club episodes just about every Tuesday these days. Thanks for listening.